what we're talking about next. So quick introductions. I'm Ben Greiner, Director of Apple Technology at Ntiva, and with me, as always, is Ross Matsuda, our Systems Administrator focused on the Apple platform. This is our April webinar talking about building an employee choice program. I'm super excited about this. Tons of information we could talk about. I've narrowed it down into a really high level. And if anyone wants to learn more or needs help getting started with any of this, as always, reach out to us so we can assist. But first, as always, some news. And since last time we talked, Ross, there have been 2 updates from Apple. There's 12.3, that was on the 14th, I think it was, and then 12.3.1 at the end of March. Just, what was that, last week?
Yeah, last week-ish. It all starts to blur together after a while.
And I call these security updates because they include security updates. And the second one was a direct security update. I think 12.3 had some additional features, bug fixes, and security updates. And in fact, if I go to Apple's website, let's see, too many windows here. Here we go. So here's Apple's security update page, and March 31st, they released 12.3.1, iOS, iPad OS updates, Watch OS updates, TV OS, Safari, a lot of security patches. Interesting, Ross, I didn't see anything for older operating systems, which is unusual. Do we know anything about that?
I believe that was by design. I think that it's possible that the older OSs weren't privy or vulnerable to whatever was detected that necessitated the push of 12.3.1 from a security standpoint, right? I think 12.3.1 also had some additional bug fixes that were Monterey specific. I do know that we just got notification that the first round of betas for the next batch of point updates has just gone out, and that's going to be 12.4. Big Sur 11.6.6 and another security update for Catalina. So all of those have just gone into beta, and we can expect another large round of patches probably coming up in the next couple weeks, depending on how rapid that beta session is.
So yeah, you can see here in the middle of March, there were some updates for the last 2 previous operating systems, which is what Apple typically patches, current and last 2. And then we had, just for whatever reason so far, only Monterey. I want to point out, because these are frustrating, right? They require restarts. Restarts take time. In fact, this is a screen grab from the 12.3. I don't have one from the 12.3.1, but you can see, even though it's halfway through, it says about 2 minutes remaining. That's just to download it. Depending on your operating system, it could take much longer than 4 minutes. It could take 20 minutes. And then once it downloaded, at least on my computer, which is not an M1, but it's fairly recent, within the past 3 years, it was going to take about 20 minutes just to prepare, and then I had to restart. And I would say it took another 10 minutes just to do everything it needed to do during the restart. So these are not quick updates as far as I've experienced. How about you, Ross?
Yeah, no, that's pretty much on brand. The thing about these is that they're as disruptive as you choose to make them. They need to get done at some point. The pro tip on this is just run them when you know you won't need the machine. If you're about to step out to lunch, the difference between 1 minute and an hour is irrelevant if you're not sitting in front of your computer, right? And so just planning these out is definitely going to be the way to go. And when we start notifying users, of these patches once they become live, once the devices look for themselves and see like, oh, there's an update available. Do you want to take care of this now or later? Always plan ahead and make sure that you proceed with it when it's a convenient time for you. And if you do that, then it's such a small deal, as long as you plan that out.
Yeah, start it before you go to lunch or at the end of the day. Just be prepared when you come back. You may need to provide credentials in some cases to get back in, and it may even do a few more things after that. It's not always a consistent, it doesn't always happen in a certain way in what I've experienced. Or maybe I'm confusing, like a lot of people, upgrades versus updates, but the updates that require restarts do take time, but they are super important. And the Apple community has benefited for many years of not having as many security updates as we've had recently. But the rise in popularity and the aggressiveness of the attackers these days is definitely on the rise, and that's why we're seeing more and more security updates. It almost seems like we're seeing 2 a month at this point on average. Maybe I'm exaggerating.
Yeah, we'd have to go through that list and run some numbers.
Yeah, right here.
But
yeah, go through the
they're
list.
often enough. They're often enough.
Okay. Before I get started, I was going to post a photo. I didn't get a chance to, but I saw Steve Wozniak yesterday at a conference live. I was in the front row center, about as close as you could get, and it was very interesting and cool. And he was a great speaker, which I was surprised about because I've heard some clips from him over the years, and they always sounded a bit oddball. And I could see where you could take some oddball clips from things he says because he's a lot of fun. But yeah, it was pretty cool to be in the same room and so close to one of the founders of Apple. And he had some stories about Steve Jobs as well. Have you ever seen Wozniak or Steve Jobs? I mean, in person?
No, not live. I've been to the main campus, and I did my Genius training in Austin, back in the day, but never really had a chance to run into any of them, the higher levels.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, so before I finish with news, I did see, Ross, Apple just posted their Worldwide Developer Conference information. So, but probably not as interesting to our customers, so we'll skip that for now.
Yeah, that's going to be great for me to start beta testing the new Mac OS, but that'll be a whole other can of worms. Don't need to deal with that.
So very quickly, what is an employee choice program and why are we talking about this? And Apple does have a very nice page here that talks about it. And really the idea is for years and years and years, IT has controlled the environment and continues to a certain extent, although I would say the iPhone disrupted that quite a bit. And people would like to use Apple devices, not just the iPhone, but they like to use Apple Macs at work, maybe Apple iPads. And for a long time, IT said no. And I believe, and everything I've read and studied and experienced, is that there's a lot of pent-up demand for Apple devices if IT will allow it. And there really is no good reason today. Like back in the day, maybe you could say, well, Apple products can't run the software we need to do our business. But today, that's rather rare, although you certainly want to consider it if you're using a special software that truly does only run on Windows. And there are software programs out there that are like that. But the majority of us who live in Office 365 or Google or any number of web apps or the desktop for Office 365, we can run these applications on a Mac. And so we're seeing a rise in employee choice programs where you as the owner of a company or someone who hires employees, you're giving them a choice for your existing team and your new hires. And that's a huge benefit you can offer your employees. That's almost like a free benefit. It doesn't cost you a lot of money. Now, there are people who still believe that Apple devices are more expensive than Windows, and Apple has a lot of data showing that that's not true. And you have to consider your entire life cycle from beginning to end of a device to figure out if Apple is truly more expensive or not. And yes, if you are a video editor and you need to produce some high-end graphics, whether on gaming or video or development, you're going to need a high-end machine, but that's going to cost more money whether it's Apple or Windows as well. So I think Apple also gets a bad rep because a lot of creatives who need a lot of power tend to gravitate toward Apple devices. And so they need to spend more money on a device typically. Ross, if I've said anything that sounds confusing, stop me and correct me. But
yeah, will do.
The general concept here is you can offer your employees a benefit to them to attract employees, to retain employees, to give them something that makes them feel better at work, as opposed to forcing a Windows PC on them. So that's the idea of an employee choice program. And I actually know some customers I've talked to who essentially are doing this. They just haven't taken advantage of fully promoting it. Like it's kind of under the table. It's kind of unwritten. It's like, well, if you ask for it, we'll let you have a Mac. And I think they're really missing out on the opportunity to take this and promote it as a benefit to working, at their location. So what are some of the benefits? And this is a list that Apple put together, but I do agree with it. So tangible benefits, ease of use, although obviously only if you feel comfortable on the platform, right? Don't just say, well, we're gonna support and adopt Apple and make everyone use an Apple, because there may be people who feel more comfortable on a Windows PC, and that's why it's employee choice. Employees should have a choice whether they work on a Windows PC or an Apple computer. So you've got some here, helps recruit employees. We talked about that, retain employees, more productivity. If you enjoy the tools you're working on, you're naturally going to be more productive. And I don't know, integrates into the network. I mean, we've integrated into the network for years, so I don't know why that's on the list. I guess there was a time, what was it, the Apple Talk networks? Remember those, Ross? You were probably before you were born.
No, I was there for that. I have chosen not to remember it.
Yeah,
but I was there.
So
for that.
Yes, Mac supports standard Wi-Fi and Ethernet, and have for many years, if not over a decade. Easy deployment and setup. Zero touch is Apple's term for easy deployment and setup, and Microsoft copied zero touch with autopilot. But I would say Apple still leads the way in that. And we fully support that, and our clients can get set up with zero touch very easily. Modern mobile device management. Apple created mobile device management. A lot of people may not know this, but I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, anyone who listens, but Apple coined the term mobile device management and created the category, and then others followed. And then free OS upgrades. They've done that for a while. And in fact, the first year they did it, it was a mess because we were accustomed to clients only upgrading when they paid for the upgrade and planned the upgrade. And then Apple announced free upgrades for everyone. All of our clients started upgrading, everything started breaking. And of course they wanted us to fix it. So I forget what year that was, but the last thing on the list, residual value. You can still get a lot of money for an old Apple device. I'm always surprised how many hundreds of dollars we can get by trading in an old device to get a new device. So that's a quick overview of why we're talking about this. And something else that came out of an Apple presentation that I was going to mention, built-in file vault encryption. I would say every single security audit I've sat through over the past few years, they want to know if you're encrypting your devices, especially your notebooks, your traveling laptops. And if you're not, that's a red flag. Like, why should we do business with you if you cannot do the basics of encrypting your data, the data that I'm trusting you with? And apparently, according to this information, maybe something changed in Windows 11, but you can't do it natively with the Windows OS. You need a third-party tool. I guess BitLocker can be included on certain license, Office 365 licenses, but not everyone has that level of licensing to include BitLocker. So this is just an example of where you have to consider not just the cost of the device, but the software required to also secure it. Okay, what I wanted to do then is kind of spend the next half of our presentation here talking about how we're building a Mac at Work program, an employee choice program at Ntiva, and how you, as a client of ours, could copy this. And of course, we can help you further develop it. And this is really the high level process. You build a pilot program, you socialize it with the managers, you share it with the employees, those that qualify. You may not have all employees who qualify for employee choice. They may have to use a specific tool. Maybe it's Windows, and there's no reason to offer them, an alternative because it wouldn't work for their environment. And then a process by which you order the computers and then the setup. So we'll run through this, and Ross, I think, as always, you don't even know what I'm presenting here until I present it. So if
Correct.
if I'm saying anything incorrectly, chime in, or if you want to add something, please chime in. And what's hard for me is this is something that we've kind of intuitively done for years. And
Mm.
what Apple does, and they're so great at doing, is taking something, simplifying it into something that you can talk about. And that's what they've done with the employee choice program. And in fact, if we go to their primary website back here, um, if you scroll down, there's a lot of good information. We could talk through this page on its own, but if you scroll down to the bottom, they have some great resources, including this employee communication kit for Mac. It's a PDF. And when I built our program at Ntiva, I still had to ask Apple for this. They had a little like, hey, if you want this, ask us and we'll send it to you. Now they've updated it. It's right here. You can just click on it and get it. It is in 2018, which I was a little surprised about because I thought they'd have something updated. Uh, but this is pretty much the template. It walks you through exactly how to build an employee choice program. And I took some of these ideas to build our own. So one of the first things I built was an online form, an internal online form. And this was all built on 365. And if I can do this with little to no development skills, anyone who has Office 365, who has access, I don't think you need to be an administrator. I'm not an administrator, but anyone who has access to 365 should be able to create a form like this. And I was going to walk through it very quickly. You fill out your name if you want to be part of the pilot program. You ask, what kind of computer are you using today? Obviously, if they're using a PC, it'd be something like, I don't know, Dell, something or other. How do you connect to the company network? Maybe your Wi-Fi only, maybe your VPN, maybe your network. You just want to get a general idea. And then, what interests you most about the Mac? I'm just going to say love it. Level of experience, just to get an idea of how much they know about the Mac. And do you currently use any Apple products? Um, this is a really important page. What software are you using today? This will be different for you, but in our world, we wanted to know, are you using 365 mostly? Do you use Chrome or Edge browsers? Publisher and Access. Why did we put Microsoft Publisher and Microsoft Access on here? Because those are two Microsoft applications that do not run on a Mac. So if you tell me that you mostly run Microsoft Publisher, we need to have a conversation because you may not be a good candidate for piloting the Apple program. And of course, is there any software we missed? We could say Zoom. We know Zoom runs on a Mac. And then how many external displays do you typically use at work? We put this on the list because Apple says certain Macs can only power a certain number of external displays. Although we've also learned since Apple released that and we've gotten our hands on these M1s and other people have as well, that's not entirely true, right, Ross? Technically, an M1 entry level can only power one display, but it really can do more than that.
Yeah, this is always something you can fudge a little, but not by design. I mean,
Yeah,
the hope is that go with the guidelines. If something even better works, mazel tov. But
yeah.
don't push your luck if you can avoid it.
Yeah, I don't like when Apple does that. I mean, I kind of understand why they do because if basically they're saying an M1 MacBook Air with two displays may have some issues.
Yeah.
Maybe your displays are too high resolution and the power's not going to be there. But there's lots of people who have reported doing this successfully. So you have to keep that in mind. But basically, if I fill this out, I'm not going to submit it. But if I fill this out and submit, it will come in this case to me because I'm helping them with the pilot program. But you could have it delivered to anyone who needs it. So once we've gotten the pilot program and send this out to a few people, see who's good candidate, talk to them about their answers. And then the next step is socialize it with managers. So I've got another window here. There we go. So socialize this with managers. So this is a SharePoint page I created. SharePoint has a feature that you can pretty much like Squarespace or any of these other WYSIWYG building websites, you can go in and build a simple site like this. It doesn't have to be SharePoint, could be Squarespace, could be whatever you use. But the idea here is that when you talk to managers about the pilot program, you explain, who qualifies, when they qualify for a new computer. I'm talking about existing employees, or obviously for new hires, who qualifies. Trade-in value if we're replacing a computer. And then the two options. In this case, we specified two options. One is the basic for most everybody, and then with some exceptions, there may be a higher end model. And these line up exactly with our custom Apple store. So every one of our clients should also have a custom Apple store for your company name. It's at ecommerce.apple.com. And you can build these recommended systems right here to make it easy to buy. They have your discounted pricing. I'm no longer logged in, so I'm not going to re-authenticate, but they have discounted pricing. The more you buy, the better discounts you'll get. Interestingly enough, Apple's currently not discounting their higher end 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pros. They're only discounting the entry level. And I don't know when they'll eventually allow the discount to happen, but maybe it's a supply chain issue. I don't know, but they are currently not discounting. Typically, they discount all the products. But so this is kind of like informing your team about how the program is to be distributed and used and followed. Once you've got that laid out and you've talked to people about it, you've gotten past the pilot program to make sure your team can run Macs in your environment, you've socialized it with managers, then it's up to the managers to share it with their employees, at least before you broadcast it widely. I think that's a good idea, because you do want to be careful. Like we have tier 1 support desk teams that are primarily supporting a Windows culture, right? I think we looked at the numbers, and out of the 100% of our Windows base clients, less than 5% or close to 5% are running Mac. I think we're going to see that go up to maybe 10% over the next year or two and beyond. But if you're running a support desk that's 95% Windows and 5% Mac, you probably don't want to give that person a Mac. It's probably not a good idea for that person to be running a Mac as their day-to-day tool. Ross, would you agree with that?
Yes, as long as we've got access to that somewhere in the IT pipeline. All right, because it's always really important. As soon as you have a single Mac in your environment, whether that's coming from a C-level who insists that this is what they use at home, this is just how they want to how they want to interact with their work. As soon as you have a single device, you really need to sit down and take the time and vet everything, right? You got to make sure that anything that you're using, especially when it comes to networking and device security, is up to snuff for that device. Once you've signed off on that, once as an organization that like, okay, this VP of whatever, their Mac is totally secure. It hits all the benchmarks we require of our Windows machines. All of our business critical software is compatible and tested. Once you've vetted that for a single person, then you can really throw open the doors for this kind of thing.
Well, I think yes, that would be ideally how you would work. It's just if you do have any departments, I'm using the Windows support desk as an example. It would be unusual to ask a Windows support desk technician if they wanted a Mac. If they want a Mac, maybe they should consider moving to the Apple team. So before you just broadly, broadcast to everyone that the employee choice program is open for all, you look at it from a team perspective, and then you slowly broaden it out from there. That was kind of what I was getting at. And
fair enough.
Yeah, and in that case, we have a different page that the managers can share with their team. Like if a manager determines that their new hire could run a Mac if they so choose, or if one of their existing employees, it's time for them to get a new machine because they've had their current Windows PC for 3 to 4 years, whatever your recommendation is for a refresh. Then you can share this and say, hey, if you're interested, this is the information we have on the Apple program. And once we get this fully integrated, I suspect we would build, the PC equivalent in here, and our employee choice program would be, here are the 2 computers you have to choose from. Obviously, if you're in a bigger organization, you may have more than 2 options, or you may have 2 options for the creative team, 2 options for everyone else, or something like that. You may even have different options if you have a video team or developer team. But I see this being iterated on and built upon. This is just early days for us at Ntiva, and it's a good exercise for me because Ross, we come from an environment where, to be fair, we never asked people what they wanted. We were 100% Apple focused. You're getting an Apple, so we were doing it the same way the Windows teams have done it for years, just with Apple instead of Windows. And ideally, if we were to get to a point, well, no, scratch that. I'm headed in the wrong direction. But the point is, you want to give people a choice, right? You don't want to dictate. So this page will eventually have Mac and Windows on it. And then if they have chosen a Mac, we created this new computer form, which I did write generically, so we can also adapt it for a Windows machine. But it basically walks through a manager ordering a computer for an employee. It's focused on Mac, but it's written to be expanded to Windows. And so once the manager orders the new computer, this form, once again, all this is created in 365. This form gets sent to the procurement team at Ntiva, and then the procurement team would go into ecommerce.apple.com to order that computer. And the last piece, which I think I'm most happy with, and I really want to see a lot of our clients adopt this, is this idea of, if you have chosen a Mac, or even if you've chosen a Windows machine, but once again, we're focused on Mac. If you've chosen a Mac and you're expecting one to arrive, in the next week through the ordering process, then here's the page. Here's everything you need to know to get your Mac set up through the zero-touch workflow. Because IT is not going to prep this computer for you. It's going to come straight from e-commerce, delivered directly to the employee. That's the zero-touch part. The employee is going to unbox it, and they're simply going to follow these instructions. And they can read these instructions prior to the Mac arriving. As we see here, you want to make sure you have a network connection, Wi-Fi or Ethernet. And if you're going to do Ethernet, you're going to need an Ethernet adapter, because the new Macs no longer include Ethernet as native connectors. And this was pretty easy when we were all in the office. It's pretty easy to get somebody connected to a network, but now that we're all at home, there are some people who haven't bought a computer in 4 years and haven't thought about how to get on their own network in 4 years. And so they need to figure that out, or none of this is going to work. None of the internet's going to work. And then we kind of walk through how we use our Apple IDs, how we use 365, how you can set up your Mac to the network, log in, local account, your first sign-in experience. For example, if you use the Office 365 desktop apps, you're going to need to give it time to install those apps. Like, Apple's not installing that from the factory, they're installing it when it first connects to the internet. Rather, we've configured it to do that. So as we say here, you might want to use your Safari browser to check your email to get access to your other accounts. And then, of course, we've got support menu and Mac Manage. Support menu up here, and Mac Manage, which, by the way, we have a new Mac Manage since last month, right, Ross?
Yeah. Adigy published a pretty big design overhaul to the piece. And after massaging out a couple bugs, it's looking pretty good. I like it.
Yeah, it's a lot faster and smoother, and we've got some cleaner presentation of information. So with zero touch, you can install apps, and then those that you need additional, you could go to Mac Manage and get them. And then we have some more information about if you're new to Mac, you may want to browse the how-tos or instructional links here, especially if you're switching from Windows. There's a great Mac tips for Windows switchers. Printing, not as much an issue since leaving the office due to the pandemic, but still some clients do need to print. And then you may have some VPN requirements. So that's a really high level overview. We just ran out of time on a employee choice program. And I encourage you to start one if you haven't, or if you already have one, you just need to kind of formalize it. And if you want to talk about it or how we built any of this, please let me know. We can schedule a time. And then next month, we will be talking about zero touch, which you've heard me mention a lot, but we're going to go deep dive into zero touch and what that means. I have found a lot of people are confused. Even when they have zero touch, they feel like they need to do something to trigger it every time they buy a computer. And we'll talk about that. The nice thing is, if you follow the process, you really don't need to do anything other than follow the process. There's nothing to no buttons to push or knobs to turn or anything like that, which is an odd feeling, I'll admit. So maybe that's why people are confused. Ross, I apologize. I didn't give you a lot of time to talk today.
That's all right. We can find another time. The last two seeds I'll plant as we're heading out the door is one of the benefits of an employee choice program is it helps you crack down on shadow IT. You might have heard this term thrown around a little bit, but at the end of the day, if an employee is unhappy with their technology or how their technology lets them do a certain task, especially work-related tasks, they will often go out and find a way to do it themselves. And when we're talking about bouncing between platforms, if you take someone who's spent their whole life working on Macs and say, here's your Windows rig, off you go, and they're familiar with other programs or other methods of doing things, you might have some pieces of software entering your workflow that you didn't plan on. And by going through the steps of vetting your own software stack and then allowing employees to have that sort of feedback and that dialogue with you about the tools that they use, you can go a long way as far as keeping things standardized, keeping things secure, and knowing what's happening on the systems that you manage.
That's a great point, Ross, because I have talked to so many people who I say, oh, you have a Mac? They're like, oh, well, this is my personal Mac. Like, oh, so you're allowed to use a personal Mac at work? Like, well, I don't know, I just use it. So that's the shadow IT you're talking about. And from a security perspective, that doesn't fly in audits anymore. If you're allowing any device to be connected to your company data, email, file servers, etc., that is a concern. So if you are allowing that, let's have a security discussion about whether that's a risk that you can take on. And with that, thanks again, Ross. Even though you didn't get a lot of time today, I always appreciate you being here. Otherwise, it feels like I'm talking to a blank screen or myself, which is never fun. So thank you. Have a great rest of your week, everyone, and we'll see you next month. Bye.